So final step is to charge these overheads to cost units. This is called absorption, OAR, overhead absorption rate. This will be production overhead like 175,000 in mixing department divided with the activity level in mixing department with the number of machine hours, etc. And what activity level you should use? Activity levels you could have OAR per unit, like I said, $5 per table, or OAR per labor hour, or maybe overhead absorption rate per machine hour. You can calculate per machine hour. So in exam, sometime you get confused that should I calculate OAR based on machine hour or based on labor hour? So answer to this question is, if you have to decide which hours to use, machine hours or labor hours, answer is that whichever number is significant. You will see in your question, if machine hours are more, you will take activity level based on machine hour. If in the question labor hours are more, you will divide with labor hour. So whichever activity is greater, whichever activity is bigger, you will take that activity as your absorption base. You could do it as percentage of direct labor cost. We will do some questions on that. That overhead is like 7% of the labor cost or 10% of the labor cost, something like that. Percentage of direct material cost, for example, 20% of the direct material is overhead. Or prime cost, percentage of your prime cost, which means material and labor both. Predetermined OARs. So this overhead absorption rate, we call it predetermined. Why do we call it predetermined? Because we calculate it, we estimate it at the beginning of the year, at the start of the year. OAR is production overhead divided with activity level. And it becomes your budgeted overhead divided by budgeted activity level. Businesses want to record overheads regularly during the year. And what will happen now? Now this is where another topic starts. That topic is called under over absorption. Now what happens that these are my overhead absorbed. Overhead absorbed means which I have taken from my client. And how do I take my client? It is actual activity multiplied by OAR. For example, if I made only, so if you remember that my budget was $5,000 and I thought that I would make only 1,000 tables. So I assumed that $5 per table I will take from my customer. So I budgeted 1,000 tables. But then what happens? That in reality, I made only 900 tables. So if I made 900 tables, if I sold 900 tables and in each table I added only $5. So it means that the money which I collected from my client is 900 tables multiplied by $5, which is $4,500. So my absorbed overhead is $4,500. Which means actual activity 900 tables multiplied by $5. Now how much I am spending in reality, that's a different case. But this is what I have collected from my customers based on my actual activity. It is called overhead absorbed. At the end of the year, actual overheads will be known. So as I told you that during the year, you are selling tables and collecting $5 per table. So this is called absorbed overhead, recovered overhead. You are collecting it from your customers, but at the same time you are spending your actual overheads on basis on your regular invoices. So that overhead which you spent during the year, you will only calculate at the end of the year. You will only find out at the end of the year. And then what will happen, that overhead absorbed is not equal to actual overhead, because if you remember, I only sold 900 tables. So I recovered 4,500, but I spent maybe 5,000, maybe 5,200, maybe I spent more, 5,500. So absorbed overheads, they are never equal to your actual overheads, because absorbed overheads is just an estimate and actual overhead is a reality. So based on estimate, you collected something from your client, but then you spent something with your, based on your actual expenditures. So these two you will compare and they will never be equal. And the difference is called under or over absorption. Under absorption is like my case when I said that 4,500 I absorbed, but actual is 5,000. So it means I under absorbed overhead. It means I collected less money from my clients. But let's suppose that I, instead of making 1,000 tables, I made 1,200 tables. So then 1,200 tables multiplied by $5, it makes me 6,000. So it means my absorbed overheads are 6,000 and let's suppose my actual overheads were only 5,500. So I took from my client 6,000, but I spent only 5,500. So it means I collected more because I absorbed more, and that is called over absorption. So over absorption is a scenario where absorbed overheads are greater than your actual overheads. Reasons for under over absorption. Why does it happen? It will always happen because it's an estimate. Why do we get an under and over absorption? Because what happened that you absorbed overheads based on your OAR, and OAR depended on budgeted overheads divided by budgeted activity. So this was my budget, this was my estimate. But in reality, your budget overheads are not equal to actual overheads because you actually spent more. So that is called that gives you expenditure variance. Variance means the difference, because your budgeted overheads and actual overheads are different, and therefore the OAR becomes different. Or maybe the budgeted activity is not equal to the actual activity. Like my budgeted activity was 1000 table, but actual activity may be 900 table, maybe 1100 tables. So this is the reason why your estimate and your actuals, they do not become equal. Reasons for using absorption costing. Why do we use absorption costing? We use absorption costing for inventory valuations. When you have to calculate, for example, like I said, that $20 is material, $10 is labor, $5 is overhead. So I know that cost of one table is $35. So I go to my warehouse and I see how many tables do I have in stock. So I've got 1000 tables, and I know that cost of one table is $35. So I will say that my inventory valuation is $35. Pricing decisions, because I have to give price to the product, and I can only give a price to the product if I know my cost, my full cost, my total cost. So material and labor are not the total cost. 20 plus 10, 30 is not my total cost. I need to add overhead to find out my total cost, and based on my total cost, I will decide my selling price. And establishing the profitability of different products. And of course, with the help of this total cost, I will calculate my profit on different products. You may have also non-production overheads. Non-production overhead means the overheads which are related to selling or admin expenses. For internal reporting, non-production overheads can also be allocated to units. Actually, for internal reporting, you don't do it for external reporting. External reporting means when you prepare your financial statements, your income statement and balance sheet, for presentation to shareholders and for other presentation, then you do not charge non-production overheads to your finished good. You only charge non-production for some other management purposes. But usually this entire topic which I told you of absorption of overheads, that is for production overheads only. That is not for non-production. Non-production you can just do for yourself for analysis purposes. One approach may be you calculate your OAR. This is for non-production overhead divided by production overhead. So you can calculate something. I am repeating it again. This is not used in calculating the unit cost. This is not used in calculate the cost of your output. This we are just doing for some analytical purposes. We will not add it to the value of inventory. We will not add it to the cost of inventory. International Accounting Standards, IS2. IS2, actually, when you will study your ACCA F3, in which you will do your inventory chapter. So IS2, the International Accounting Standard, it deals with the inventory and it deals with the valuation of inventory. And IS2 requires you to calculate your inventory using absorption costing method, which means that the fixed production overhead, which was in our case, let's suppose $5, it must be added to the value of inventory. So IS2, it requires you to calculate the value of your inventory using absorption costing method. So that is all with this chapter. It is a very important chapter in your ACCA F2. I would say that it is one of the most important chapter, and you will find a lot of questions from this chapter. And I also know that after watching this video, you may feel that you have understood, but I'm sure that you have not understood it completely. Even if you understand 75%, that is enough for me, because the remaining 25% you would only understand when you will do questions with me and by yourself. So I will move to the next video where I will solve some questions using absorption costing. We will do questions for under absorption, over absorption, absorbed overheads, and OAR calculations. So there are some 10 questions which I have picked up. So you must watch that video for doing 10 questions, and then I'm sure you also must do 10 questions by yourself. Only after doing 20 questions you would be in a position to go to exam. Because this is not a topic which you would understand just by listening. You have to do a lot of practice. It's a difficult topic and it's a very important topic. So let's move to our next video for doing questions.